Good morning and welcome to our next session in the writing of a one chance story. Today we're going to be using a plan to help us begin writing the story. Now I've only focused on the first two sections, which you will see I've gone into some detail with. So let's look at the plan to begin with. So when we write, we have to make sure we have a plan, because that plan helps us to know where we're going and what we're going to include. So here is my plan, which is on the planning template that was sent out yesterday. So I thought we could have children practicing for the nativity performance. It's snowing outside, but they aren't allowed to play in it. Brad and Poppy are backstage looking through the props. Poppy dreams there would be no school so they can play in the snow. Now when rummaging through the props, they come across an old goblet covered in dust in the history section. Brad brushes the dust off it, and it lists all the children and what they have wished for on the goblet. Poppy snatches it out of Brad's hands and looks at it. She is so excited and tells Brad exactly what she wants to wish for. Brad warns her against it, as what would they do all day? They wouldn't be able to see their friends or learn. But Poppy ignores Brad and makes the wish anyway. Nothing happens except for her name, and the wish appears on the goblet. The school day finishes with another boring rehearsal of the nativity. When Poppy gets home, her parents are watching the news on TV. It is announced that schools are going to be closed forever. Poppy cheers and celebrates, but the man explains that all children will be given a job, and that they will receive their job by email. Poppy runs desperately back to school and tries to get the goblet to make a wish, but it is too late. The school gates are locked and no one can get in. Brad texts her, explaining how disappointed he is, because they won't be able to see each other anymore. So, when writing, we need to use our plan, but we also need to use the text we've learned, because that contains a lot of the features that we learned. So I've broken it down into sections, and here's the opening section. There's the plan from what you have just seen, and here's the original text. And as you can see, the original text starts with a fronted adverbial of outside, telling us where. It then starts with a description sentence of 3, helping to set the scene. It then moves inside. So I wanted to continue in a similar way. Well, to start in a similar way. So I started with outside. The air was cold and heavy. Instantly we get that idea that it's not very welcoming outside. Then I added a sentence of 3. A blustery wind hissed through the skeletal trees, warning of the frost, and throwing snow against the windows of Rutland Primary School. Again, it's building to this idea that outside's very unwelcoming. The skeletal trees tells us it's maybe in the winter. The frost tells us it's not very warm or welcoming, and throwing snow against the windows. It seems like the outside's almost attacking the inside, trying to get in. Very much like what they did in the original text. But I wanted to give a little bit extra description. So, the playground. And then I added a dropped-in clause. Normally full of life and laughter, was an angry ocean of frozen white waves, guarded by ice soldiers hanging from the roof. Now, obviously, there aren't actually ice soldiers hanging from the roof. I was just talking about the icicles hanging that you see on the gutters in winter. But I wanted to make it feel like the children were trapped inside. Also, an angry ocean of frozen white waves. I kind of had this image of the snow being blown across the playground in these waves. But I thought, we've described the outside, so what's happening inside? Well, inside, the radiators were warm, the windows steamed, and the lights on the tree danced to the merry music. As you can see, I've used a sentence of 3 again. The radiators were warm, the windows steamed, and the lights on the tree danced to the merry music. So the idea of warm, nice steamed windows, and lights dancing on the tree to the merry music. I've tried to paint a very positive, happy picture that the inside is actually very welcoming. It doesn't mean that everything's going perfectly inside, it just means it feels more approachable, more welcoming, and a little more settling. So then I added some more. Poppy peered through the window and sighed before turning and staring resentfully at her teacher. Okay, so we know Poppy is at school, so we know the inside is in the school, as we learned from Rutland Primary School. She scanned the rest of the class and noticed the yawns, the boredom in their eyes, and the desperation to be out in the snow. Again, I've used another sentence of 3 with the yawns, the boredom in their eyes, and the desperation to be out in the snow. Hopefully this paints a picture of the class being really unhappy to be there. Not angry, not rioting or demanding to be outside, but the quiet reservation and the quiet anger almost that they're stuck inside. They just don't want to be there. No one does when it's snowing outside. Then finally I finished it in a similar way to the original story. Surely the class deserves better than another nativity practice. So again, I've explained what they're doing without actually saying it. So that brings an end to the first paragraph, and we move on to the next part. So I've introduced the characters, introduced the setting. I've also introduced the idea that Poppy isn't very happy. Okay, she's dreaming of a change. You know, she wants to be out there. So we then move on to the next part, in which we're going to find an object and it's something that they can use to make a wish. So here's the original, and here's where I started. So I started with suddenly again. It's nice to change, bring a prompt change to the story. So suddenly the wind howled and opened one of the tattered windows backstage, blowing the costumes everywhere. So this idea of this wind coming in, just creating havoc, mayhem backstage. Brad shuddered. The wind was abnormally cold, even in this weather. So instead of the Labrador reacting, the dog, I've allowed her friend Brad to shudder. So the wind was abnormally cold, even in this weather. So even though it's snowing, the wind is even colder than normal. Quickly, Poppy and Brad tried to restore order behind the curtains before Miss Stickleworth accused them of the mayhem. So remember, they're backstage, so they're behind the curtains, and they just really want to get it sorted. They want to make sure that Miss Stickleworth doesn't think they've just been messing about and creating a mess. Pulling down the angel costume that had settled onto the history resources, something metal struck Brad heavily on the foot, causing him to let out a yelp of pain. So here, I've tried to show the object interacting with the characters. Okay, the object is something metal. I'm guessing it's quite heavy if it's struck heavily on his foot. Finally, Poppy stared down at the mysterious object on the floor. In all her years of working backstage in the productions, she had never seen this prop. So I've brought in this idea that the prop is something completely new, something we've never seen. So what is it? From here, I would then go on to describing the prop and saying how she's going to use it to make the wish to move the story forward. So I've used the original text to support me. I've used our sentences of 3 we've looked at. I've looked at the contrast between outside and inside. And then later on, I'm going to start using some speech. Now remember, if we use speech too often, it really does negatively affect the story. You don't want a whole story of speech, not in short stories, as you normally get lost in the conversation rather than advancing the events and creating character. So hopefully that helped with the first 2 paragraphs, and I will put another one on tomorrow and we will go from there. I hope you enjoyed writing this story because I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, and I will see you tomorrow.